All right, we are out here in the middle of the Palm Bay Swamp. We're at the end of Malabar Road, Three Forks Marsh Wildlife Management Area. Some better know it as Lake Lawton. So we had some overcast conditions yesterday. Rained a little bit, first rain we've had in a good while. And then it's a little bit cloudy right now, but overall it's gonna be pretty sunny today. It's been sunny all morning, didn't get out. It's about 11 o'clock right now when I got out here. I really think that it ought to set these fish up underneath these pads. And as you can see all around, there's a lot of clumps of pads, and we get in some other areas that it kind of opens up a little bit, you know, and there's not quite as many pads. But I really believe that it's going to put these fish under these pads. So I'll probably be wrong, but maybe not. But anyway, come along. I'm going to go out here, probably fish some swim jigs, some top water, maybe dob a Nichols Grass Wizard jig around down some of these pads a little bit, but let's go see what we can do. Score! Number one. I really believe this color. We got so many tilapia down here that I think this color represents a tilapia so much more than like just your standard frog, you know what I mean? Like, it's a color that they came out with, and it's meant to look like a frog, and it does a great job of that. But I swear that they think it's a tilapia down here. I mean, it's just that gold, and, you know, and obviously they feast on these little baby tilapia, so that's awesome. Glad I'm getting bit on this thing today. I'm gonna keep after it. Begging, boys. I mean, I'm begging. I mean, I'm begging. Oh, come here, girl. Come here, girl. Come here, girl. Yes. Woo! Look at that. I mean, that sledgehammer from Nichols. Net bait kicking bee on the back. Florida hammer, JT's. Woo, look at that big dog up going. All right, boys and girls. Let's put this big old girl right back. Oh God. Oh, that's so much fun. I mean, she erupted. I mean, full up Van Halen eruption. I mean, that's exactly what I heard in my brain. I heard Eddie Van Halen just yes. Here. Here. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, about that. That's a nice one. You got sledgehammered, homie. You know, one of the really cool things about a swim jig, and this happens to be the Nichols sledgehammer. It's the sledgehammer because it's got a giant hook in it. But you know, sometimes you need a hook that big, and it's not all the time. You don't always need some big giant gaff of a hook, okay? You just don't. And a lot of times a lighter hook is better. But in the situation we're in today, we're out on this big, it's not really a spawning flat. You know, this area is an area they go after they spawn. It's got a lot of lily pads, as you can see, and a lot of them are these flat pads. They have these really stringy root systems, and the roots kind of go, or the stems, you know, just kind of go everywhere down through there. And then there's also a lot of bushes too. So what we'll call a lot of emergent, not submergent, a lot of emergent vegetation in this area. So when you're bringing something through this, like, there's almost hardly nothing that you can get through it but a swim jig. And what a swim jig does when there's so much cover like there is here, I mean, you can see behind me, it's just literally, it's a lake here in Palm Bay. It's just miles of cover. And you have to have something that you can efficiently cover water until you can find concentrations of these fish. Very rarely have I ever seen it when you have a giant, just absolutely massive area of cover like this, they're just evenly spread out everywhere. Very, very seldom. They'll be, most of the time what happens is there's lots of dead water, and then they'll be grouped up in some small areas. So what you need to do until you figure out where those small areas are, you need to efficiently cover a lot of water. You know, you just need to keep going and going and going till you get a bite, and then you can slow down and you can throw a net bait salt lick around, or just Texas rig something or whatever. You know, maybe go to a scum frog or, you know, snag proof frog or something. But to be able to effectively keep going and going and going and be able to cover this, like, as good as the fishing is in Palm Bay, I hate to say it, but there's not fish everywhere. Some days it feels like there is, but there's not fish everywhere. So when you got to be able to cover the water, and a swim jig is a perfect way. I put it, you know, I put it on a Halo Kryptonite 7.2 heavy action. I use an Ardent Apex Grand. I use it's a 7.3-1. And that setup allows me to be able to hook and, you know, and land these fish when they do bite. But that 7.3-1, you know, I'm standing on the trolling motor. I'm going, I'm covering water, throwing it out there. I'm reeling it across the top of these lily pads, letting it dob down in the holes. You know, I'm reeling it past some of these bushes and stuff. But being able to efficiently cover this much water, like if I came through here and tried to cast a plastic worm at every single piece of cover I see sticking out of the water, I wouldn't get anywhere and I'd never find any fish. So a swim jig like this Sledgehammer from Nichols is a great way to cover a lot of water. I like to put something on the back of it, you know, that has a lot of action. So as I'm just casting it out and I'm just reeling it in, whether I'm popping it over the pads or just reeling it through the water. My favorite here lately has been a net bait kicking bee. You know, it's a little creature style bait just with some kicking legs on it. It's kind of got that flat profile, so it allows the jig to be able to kind of float a little bit. And why I really like that around these lily pads is I'm using a little bit heavier head than I typically would. This is a 1/2 ounce, and it's only about 2.5 feet deep. So typically I would be using like a 3/8 or a 1/4 in this situation. But with a little bit heavier one, what that allows me to do, and the profile of that kicking bee, you can see how it's real flat like that, but when it's rigged like that, it kind of allows that bait to plane a little bit. So it holds it up, even though it's a 1/2 ounce, it's holding it up off the bottom. But yet when I get in one of those little holes in the lily pads, because I'm bringing it across the top of the pads, and then it comes to a hole and I want it to drop down in that hole, well, a 1/4 or 3/8 wouldn't pull down in there, but this 1/2, it'll actually pull down in under the pads a little bit. So that kicking bee with the profile of it just allows you to be able to use a little bit heavier head so you can dunk it down in the holes. So that's the setup for today so far. Let's get back after it because the bass are biting. Came off those spatter dock pads right there instead of I had been catching them all on you can see these spatter dock pads, they're the ones that stick up out of the water, and there's not as many of them. I had been catching most of them off the flat pads, you know, the flat ones you can see back there behind them, instead of these spatter dock ones. But hey, I'll take them off whatever, right? That's the advantage of fishing in a bunch of lily pads. Can you believe that? Line got wrapped around my rod tip. My braid snapped. Jig went woo, went flying, and I found it. Dirty little vixen comes back to daddy every time. better one right there, boy. A better one, yeah. So here's what I did. Check this out. So I was seeing some fish moving on. Look at Nichols. I mean, stabified. We're gonna get stabified. What I did, let's get this fish back in the water real quick. So I had quite a few fish following my scum frog. I caught one right away on it and missed another one, but I could see a lot of fish they would move on it, but like they didn't want to commit to it. So I just went to this Nichols sledgehammer swim jig. I got a net bait kicking bee on the back. I love that kicking bee. That's such a cool bait. But anyway, I went to this jig to where, like, and that's exactly what I thought was gonna happen. I mean, to the T, what I thought was gonna happen. I was reeling that jig across the top of those pads, saw a fish move at it, but I dropped it. You know what I mean? Instead of making him come up, I dropped it down, and he just exploded on it. But I think that's gonna be the deal. So let's give the sledgehammer a couple more casts, see what happens. I'm throwing it, this is rod I always throw a swim jig on. I'm throwing it in heavy cover. 7.2 Kryptonite Halo, 7.2 Kryptonite heavy action. I like that heavy action, be able to really jerk them up out of that heavy cover. And this sledgehammer has a giant hook. You can see right there, it's got a giant hook in it. So, you know, to be able to pound that hook down home into their lip, you got to have braided line. I like the heavy action rod too. And plus, when you get hung up down those pads and everything, you can really just jerk it and get it out of there real quick. So let's see if we can get another one. Stop, drop, and roll, boys. All right, guys, you want to talk about a show that we were getting jiggy with it? We got jiggy with it today. Most of the fish we caught throwing that Nichols Lures sledgehammer swim jig with a net bait kicking bee on the back. The sledgehammer swim jig from Nichols, that was in the Florida Hammer color. And most of the time on the net bait kicking bee, we were throwing Bama bug, but a couple of times we mixed in a little bit of Okeechobee crawl in there. But yeah, that was really the star of the show. We caught a couple small fish pitching a JT Kenny Nichols Lures Grass Wizard jig around a little bit, but most of them, definitely the star of the show, you know, was that sledgehammer swim jig and that net bait kicking bee on the back. So just a ton of fun. You know, we're throwing it on a 7.2 heavy action Halo Kryptonite rod and Ardent 7.3-to-1 reel, real heavy braided line, and it's just fun. Some of those just explosions, just them fish just come up through those pads, just whoosh. It was almost like a jig, almost more like a scum frog than it was a jig some of the times, trying to reel it across those pads to dump it down into the little holes. And sometimes they just come up through the pads before you even got the jig to a hole. So a lot of fun. Caught one great big one, caught, you know, several real nice ones. Just, man, just a fun day. But that's it for me. I'm gonna call it a day. I'm glad you guys came. I'm glad you guys watched the show. I'm sure we'll have another one uploaded soon. Thanks, guys.